The poop had wings. This bothered Arale Norimaki far less than it should have. In Penguin Village, stranger things happened before breakfast. But this particular specimen, brown gleaming and sporting what appeared to be genuine feathered appendages, had been darting through the air for the better part of an hour, always staying just out of reach. "Gotchin, it's getting away again." The small angel-like creature chirped beside her purple wings, fluttering as it attempted to follow. Gotchin had eaten many things in its short existence: cars, street signs, the occasional meteorite. But today, it had made a mistake. The rift it swallowed wasn't food. Reality tore. The sound was wrong. Not an explosion or a crack, but something closer to fabric ripping at the seams of existence itself. The sky folded inward, colors bleeding into shades that had no names, and the flying poop vanished into a spiral of impossible geometries. "Wait, come back." Arale leaped after it. Gotchin followed without hesitation. The creature had no concept of danger, much like its adoptive sister. The warp took them both. What happened next defied every law of physics that governed the Imperium of man. The Imperium should have shredded their bodies, boiled their souls, scattered their essence across 10,000 years of madness. But Arale Norimaki had no soul to boil. She was an android built by a nearsighted genius in a world where logic bent to comedy rather than cosmic horror. And Gotchin simply digested what tried to digest it. They fell. Through layers of screaming, nothing past demon things that recoiled in confusion, across streams of raw emotion that had no purchase on a mind that didn't technically exist. Arale giggled. The colors were pretty. Then they hit Greya. The Forge world had stood for 6,000 years, a monument to the Omnissiah's glory. 17 Titan legions called it home. 3 billion souls labored in its factories, forging weapons for humanity's endless wars. The planet's crust was more metal than stone, reinforced with ceramite plates thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment. Arale went through it like tissue paper. The impact registered on seismic sensors as a magnitude 9 event. Magos Vex was reviewing production quotas when every alarm in the manufactorum began screaming at once. His augmetic eyes flickered through 700 data streams in the span of a heartbeat. Impossible. Something had struck Sector Gamma 77 with the force of a capital ship's lance battery. But there had been no energy signature, no trajectory, no warning, just impact. Activate defense protocols. Deploy Scutarii units to breach point. I want vid capture and bioscans immediately. His subordinates moved with mechanical precision, mechadendrites whirring as they interfaced with the Forge world's machine spirit. Within 90 seconds, armed cyborg soldiers surrounded the crater. What they found made no sense. A small girl sat in the center of the devastation, purple hair, adorned with a small cap, oversized glasses perched on her nose. She wore a simple outfit that seemed utterly mundane against the backdrop of twisted metal and melted stone. Beside her, a winged creature nibbled on a piece of broken plasma conduit. She waved. Ho yo yo, hello. Scutarii Alpha 09 had fought Greenskins heretics, and once even a shard of the Deceiver itself. His emotional centers had been surgically removed decades ago, replaced with tactical processing units. Yet something in his remaining organic brain struggled with the scene before him. Target appeared to be a juvenile human female. Threat assessment minimal. Except she had just survived a fall that should have vaporized her on atmospheric entry. And she was smiling. Identify yourself. His Vox speaker crackled with machine code authority. Arale stood up, brushing cosmic dust from her dress. I'm Arale. This is Gotchin. We were chasing a poop, but then everything got all swirly. And now we're here. Where's here? Magos Vex arrived in person, his hover platform gliding over debris. 17 mechadendrites extended from his robes, each ending in a different analytical device. He began scanning immediately. The results were heretical. Body composition, unknown alloy, non-imperial manufacture. Energy signature null. Warp presence absent. Biological function, none detected. Yet she moved, spoke, exhibited behavioral patterns consistent with human children. This unit requests clarification. You are not organic, yet you demonstrate autonomous function without detectable power source. Explain. Arale tilted her head, a gesture that would have been endearing if it hadn't rotated a full 90 degrees further than human anatomy allowed. I'm a robot Dr. Norimaki made me. Do you want to see? Before anyone could respond, she reached up and removed her head. The Skitari opened fire. Las bolts screamed through the air, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. Arale stood there, holding her head under one arm, looking confused as the beams passed harmlessly around her. She was moving, but not in any way the targeting systems could predict. One moment she stood still, the next, she was 3 meters to the left, then behind a startled Skitarii, then somehow on top of a demolished storage tank. Why are you shooting? Are we playing a game? She set her head back on her shoulders with a soft click. Magos Vex raised one skeletal hand. The firing ceased. His logical processing centers were overheating, cycling through theological subroutines that had no answer for this paradox. The Omnissiah's teaching spoke of the perfection of the machine. This entity was clearly artificial, yet possessed capabilities that exceeded even the most sacred STCs. Cease aggression protocols. Subject demonstrates technology beyond current imperial classification. Recommend capture for theological analysis. Arale's eyes lit up behind her glasses. Theological? Is that like a game? I'm really good at games. She took a step forward. The ground cracked beneath her foot, spiderwebs of fractures racing outward for 50 meters. Skitarii stumbled as the manufactorum floor buckled. Analysis suggests extreme density despite compact form. Gravitational distortion minimal. Physics profile incompatible with known material science. Gotchin chose that moment to eat a Skitari's rifle. The soldier stood frozen as the creature simply opened its mouth and the weapon disappeared, metal charge pack and all. Then it burped. Gotchin, that's not food. Arale shook her finger at the angel creature, who responded with an innocent chirp. Magos Vex made a decision that would haunt his remaining biological neurons for the rest of his existence. Subject poses unknown threat level. Deploying Titan Reaver designation, unyielding conviction. The call went out across the noosphere. In Bay 17, a god machine stirred. Titan Reavers stood 40 meters tall, bristling with weapons that could level cities. Unyielding conviction had walked for 3,000 years, its machine spirit tempered in 100 wars. When it stepped into the manufactorum, each footfall shook the foundations of the world. The princeps, neurally bonded to the war machine's consciousness, perceived the target through layers of augmented reality. A child. No, not a child. Something wearing a child's shape. The machine spirit growled in his mind, aggressive and wary. Arale looked up at the towering form of steel and weaponry. Her eyes went wide. Wow. You're really big. Are you a robot too? The Titan's targeting systems locked on. Plasma destructors charged building heat that turned the air shimmering. Final warning. The Princeps's voice boomed from external speakers. Remain stationary for containment or face immediate termination. Arale waved both hands over her head, jumping up and down. High, high up there. Then she did what she always did when meeting new friends. She headbutted them hello. What happened next would be analyzed, debated, and ultimately classified as a theological crisis by 17 different Mechanicus sects. Arale crouched slightly, then launched herself upward. Not jumped. Launched. The concrete beneath her feet vaporized from the force. She covered 40 meters in less than a second. Her head connected with the Titan's torso plating right where the plasma core housing joined the main chassis. The impact made no sound. Instead, reality seemed to pause as if the universe itself needed a moment to process what it had just witnessed. Then, unyielding conviction left. 3,000 tons of blessed machinery shot upward through the Manufactorum roof, through 6 layers of atmospheric shielding through the planet's defensive satellite network and into the void beyond. The Princeps, still neurally linked, experienced every second of the uncontrolled ascent before his consciousness mercifully shut down. The Titan became Graia's newest moon, tumbling end over end in high orbit. Arale landed lightly, adjusting her glasses. Oops. I think I pushed too hard. Every tech priest within visual range performed the sign of the cog. Several simply shut down their logic centers, unable to reconcile what they had witnessed with the fundamental laws of the universe. Magos Vex watched his entire understanding of reality crumble. If the Omnissiah truly existed, if the machine god truly guided their hands, then surely technology had limits. Surely physics meant something. Surely a child-shaped thing couldn't simply punch a battle titan into orbit with a headbutt. He spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, more prayer than statement. If the divine machine is real, why does it look like a little girl? Arale smiled, completely oblivious to the theological crisis spreading through the noosphere like a virus. Because Dr. Norimaki wanted a daughter. Can someone show me where the bathroom is? I've been holding it for ages, Gotchin chirped happily and began eating a support pillar. Somewhere in the depths of the Manufactorum, klaxons continued to wail, but nobody moved to answer them. The Mechanicus of Graia stood paralyzed, watching as innocence incarnate dismantled everything they thought they knew about the universe. And Arale, completely unaware that she had just shattered 6,000 years of religious doctrine, really did need to find a bathroom. The distress signal from Graia propagated through the Imperium's communication networks, like ripples in a pond. Most received garbled reports of a Titan-class threat, words like anomaly and unprecedented force, buried in layers of encryption and theological debate. The orcs, however, heard something far more interesting. Something had kicked a god machine into space. War boss Grotmada Red received the news while gnawing on the leg bone of his previous second-in-command. His massive frame, a patchwork of scars and crude bionics, shifted in his throne made from crushed Imperial tanks. One eye was a whirring mechanical contraption that zoomed and clicked as he processed the information Big Mech Skrahaz was shouting at him. Boss, de Humie's got some find that punch dare big stompy robot clean off the planet days panicking all over the place? Grotma spat out a piece of bone. How big Titan-class boss, one of the really shooty ones. The war boss's grin revealed teeth filed to points, several replaced with sharpened scrap metal. In Orc society, there existed a simple philosophy: if something could crump a Titan, that something was worth fighting. Or following. Or possibly both. Get to boys. We's gonna see what's so tough it makes the Humies scared. Within the hour, a ramshackle fleet of orc vessels began their approach to Graia. Each ship looked like it should have disintegrated from structural failure decades ago, held together by nothing but scrap metal blind faith. And the peculiar orc belief that if enough greenskins thought something should work, it generally did. Arale, meanwhile, had found the bathroom. She'd also found the Mechanicus's most sacred data vault, 3 restricted theological archives, and a storage facility containing 15 different patterns of plasma weaponry. Not because she was searching for them, but because Gotchin kept eating doors, and she kept following the small creature through the holes. Magos Vex had assigned 17 different security details to track her. All 17 had filed incident reports, claiming the subject moved in patterns that violated basic causality. She would be in Sector Alpha, then immediately appear in Sector Theta, without traversing the space between. Surveillance feeds showed her walking through walls, not breaking them, simply occupying the space on the other side without transition. The Mechanicus had begun emergency theological councils. Some advocated for immediate termination. Others insisted she was a divine test of faith. A growing minority had begun worshipping her, declaring that the Omnisia had finally manifested in physical form. Then the orcs arrived. The green-skinned raiders hit Graia's outer defenses like a meteor storm of bad intentions and worse engineering. Skitarii units mobilized across 17 fronts. Remaining Titans deployed from their bays, Princeps still traumatized from witnessing unyielding Conviction's orbital trajectory, but willing to die for the Forge world. Grotma's kill cruiser, a vessel that looked like several ships had been smashed together by a particularly creative accident, broke through the defense grid. The war boss himself led the boarding party, eager to find whatever had scared the Mechanicus badly enough to lock down an entire sector. He found her in what used to be a Promethium refinery. Arale was playing hopscotch, using storage containers of volatile fuel as markers. Each jump landed with enough force to dent the reinforced flooring. Gotchin sat nearby, having successfully eaten through a support pillar, and now working on what appeared to be a load-bearing wall. Grotma stopped. His massive jaw hung open, a string of drool escaping one corner. Behind him, 30 boys, armed with choppas and slugas, stared in equal confusion. A tiny purple-haired girl looked up at them and smiled. "Ho Yo-Yo, are you here to play too?" The war boss had lived for 70 years, which was ancient for an orc. He'd crumped hundreds of enemies, survived 11 assassination attempts from his own followers, and once headbutted a space marine dreadnought until it stopped moving. His instincts for violence were honed to perfection. Those instincts were screaming at him that this small creature was the most dangerous thing he'd ever encountered. "You the one what kicked a Titan." Arale nodded enthusiastically. "The big robot I was just saying hello. Do you want to be friends?" She took a step toward them. The boys raised their weapons on pure reflex. Grotma held up one massive hand, stopping them. Something in his brain. The part that made him war boss. The part that could sense power like a beast. Smells blood was telling him this wasn't a fight. This was something better. "Oi, what's your name, Tiny?" "I'm Arale Norimaki. What's yours?" "Grotma da Red Warboss, of the Red Skull Clan Terror of Da." He paused. "You ain't scared." "Why would I be scared? You seem nice." Big Mech Skrughaz pushed through the crowd of boys, his mechanical eye whirring as it analyzed the girl. Half his head was replaced with barely functional machinery that sparked and hissed. "Boss, I'm getting weird readings." "She ain't human. She's..." He squinted. "She's like a really good robot," Arale beamed. "I am a robot Dr. Norimaki made me." The orcs looked at each other. Robots, they understood. Robots that could punch Titans into orbit, and that was new. That was interesting. That was in the unique orc philosophical framework absolutely brilliant. Grotma's grin widened. "You want to see some fine fun?" "Yes. We's gonna crump some humies. Wanna watch?" Arale clapped her hands. Is it like a game? Da best game. Come on. What followed would later be classified by Imperial historians as the joyful catastrophe, though orcs simply called it da best wag ever. Arale followed the greenskins with innocent enthusiasm, completely unaware that her mere presence was doing something impossible to the fabric of reality around them. Orcs possessed a latent psychic field, the wag energy that made their impossible technology function, and their collective belief reshape probability. The effect grew stronger with numbers, with violence, with pure unbridled joy in destruction. Arale was joy incarnate. The Wag field around Grotma's clan began to surge. Boys felt stronger, faster, meaner. Guns that hadn't worked in years suddenly roared to life. A truck that had been held together with wire and prayers spontaneously repaired itself, its engine growling with newfound power. Big Mech Scroghaz watched his instruments go haywire. Boss da Wag. It's growing. I ain't never seen numbers like this. Grotma felt it too. Every orc did. It was like someone had plugged them directly into the primal source of green skin power, amplifying everything that made them orcs. He threw back his head and roared, the sound echoing through the refinery. Around Graia's orbit, orc reinforcements that had been light years away suddenly picked up the signal. Not a communication, but a feeling. A pull. The Wag was calling, and it was calling louder than it had in centuries. They came. Ships appeared from the warp in numbers that made the Mechanicus's defense fleets look like a ceremonial honor guard. Hundreds of ramshackle vessels, each packed with boys, eager for a fight drawn by the psychic beacon of pure destructive joy. Arale played tag with a squad of orcs through the manufactorum halls. Every time she tagged one, the green skin would laugh, feeling invincible, and immediately go looking for something to crump. They found Skitarii. They found Imperial Guard reinforcements. They found resistance everywhere, and they loved it. You're it. Arale tapped a massive knob on the arm and sprinted away, moving at speeds that made her appear as a purple blur. The knob bellowed in delight and charged after her straight through a reinforced security door, through a Skitarii defensive position, through 3 walls of a hab block. His followers poured after him, roaring with laughter and bloodlust in equal measure. Grotma stood on the hull of his kill cruiser, watching as his Wa grew beyond anything he'd imagined possible. Ships were arriving every minute. Not just his clan, but freebooters, speed freaks, even some bad moons in their Flash Gitz armor. Boss, Skrighaz said quietly, which for an orc meant barely below a shout. The other war bosses are asking who's in charge of Diswa. Grotma thought about that. Normally, this would mean fighting establishing dominance through violence, until only the strongest remained. But something told him that wasn't the answer here. Tell him we's following the prophet. Prophet what prophet? The tiny purple one. The one what makes the Wag feel good. Within hours, the title spread through the orc fleet like wildfire. The prophet of joyful Crumpen. The tiny boss. The one what kicked the titan. Orcs being orcs, they immediately began arguing about what it meant, which led to fighting, which led to more Wag energy, which made everyone stronger and happier. Arale found the whole thing delightful. These big green people loved playing games, even if their games involved a lot of shooting and yelling. When Grotma introduced her to the concept of a Wag, which he explained as, when all day boys get together and crump stuff real good, she thought it sounded like the best party ever. She stood on the deck of the kill cruiser, looking out at the gathered fleet. Thousands of ships, millions of orcs, all because they wanted to be near her. She didn't understand why, but she waved at them. Anyway. Every orc who saw her wave felt it. A surge of energy, of purpose, of the pure, uncomplicated joy of existence. The Wog field spiked so hard that Psychers 3 systems away collapsed from psychic feedback. On Graia below, Magos Vex received reports that made his remaining organic components want to shut down permanently. The orc assault had grown from a raiding party to a full-scale invasion, to what appeared to be the largest Wog convergence in recorded history. And at its center, the tiny anomaly that had destroyed everything he thought he knew about the universe. He opened a priority channel to Terra, encoding the message with his personal cipher. Forge World Graia to Segmentum Command. We have a situation beyond Omega-level threat classification. Request immediate intervention. Subject designation unknown. Orc response unprecedented. Recommendation planetary quarantine and... He paused, the words catching in his Vox synthesizer. And pray to the Emperor, because the Omnicia cannot explain this. In orbit, Arale played hide-and-seek with 200 orcs who had never been happier in their violent lives. Gotchin had eaten part of a ship's engine and was now glowing faintly with absorbed energy. And the Wog grew stronger with every passing moment, fed by the presence of something that had no right to exist. The Greenskins called it a blessing. The Imperium called it a nightmare. Arale just called it fun. The warp should not have noticed her. In the roiling sea of souls and madness that existed beneath reality, countless entities screamed and writhed and plotted. Demons hunted for cracks in the materium. Lesser spirits fed on emotion like parasites. And at the center of it all, 4 powers sat enthroned in their own domains, ancient beyond mortal comprehension, fed by every dark impulse that had ever stained a sentient mind. They had ignored Graia. Forge worlds held little interest for the Chaos Gods, too much machine, not enough soul, bland and flavorless to entities that fed on passion and belief. But then the Wog began to sing. Orc psychic energy, always registered in the immaterium, a crude green roar of violence and joy. This was different. This burned with an intensity that had no precedent, bright enough to draw attention from beings that existed before human civilization learned to make fire. Tzeentch noticed first. The architect of fate sat upon a throne of crystallized possibility, 999 eyes, watching 999 different futures simultaneously. When he looked at the source of the Wog surge, every eye reported the same thing. Nothing. Not absence, not void. Simply nothing, as if that particular thread of fate had been cut from the tapestry of causality entirely. This was wrong. This violated the fundamental nature of the great ocean. Everything that existed had a future, 1,000 branching paths of probability. Everything left traces in the warp. "Show me," he commanded, his voice layered with harmonics that drove mortal listeners insane. The vision came. A small figure, purple-haired, smiling. The changer of ways saw her and recoiled. His vision showed him her past error, her future error, her present location error. Her very existence was an equation that refused to resolve. Impossible. The word tasted like ash in a mouth that existed across 17 dimensions. Horn felt the disruption next, though he interpreted it differently. The blood god cared nothing for subtlety or contemplation. He sensed combat, an ocean of green skin aggression swelling to unprecedented heights. His realm, built from skulls and soaked in the blood of eternity's wars, trembled with anticipation. Then he perceived the cause and roared. The sound rippled through the warp, toppling brass towers and sending demon legions scrambling for cover. This was not fury born of battle. This was confusion, and Khorne despised confusion above all things. The entity at the center of the Wa had no rage, no hate, no fury. It radiated something his nature could barely process: happiness. Pure, unfiltered, uncomplicated joy. It was anathema to everything he represented. Worse, it was infectious. The orcs around her fought with laughter instead of rage, their violence divorced from malice. They killed because it was fun, not because they hated. What is this? The question emerged as a growl that shattered a mountain range in the mortal realm. 3 systems over. Nurgle had been tending his garden when the disturbance reached him. The Plague Father moved slowly, deliberately, his massive form dripping with generous gifts of disease and decay. He found the disruption curious rather than threatening. Something new was always interesting, and newness was rare in a universe as old as the one he inhabited. He looked, and he smiled, flies buzzing from between rotted teeth. Oh, how delightful. The small creature registered in his perception as clean. Not sterile sterility was merely the absence of life. This was something else. Purity without being pure. Existence without corruption or the potential for corruption. Like a perfect crystal that disease could not touch because disease was a concept it did not acknowledge. Nurgle wanted to give her gifts. He wanted to share his blessings, to see if that cheerful innocence could survive 1,000 plagues. Not from malice, but from genuine affection. He loved all things, especially things that might change under his generous touch. Slaanesh was the last to notice. But when the Dark Prince's attention focused on the anomaly, it was with an intensity that made the others seem casual by comparison. The god of excess existed in perpetual hunger for new sensations, new experiences, new heights of feeling. Every emotion, every sensation, every possible experience was food for the Prince of Pleasure. And this creature, this impossible thing, radiated a sensation Slaanesh had not encountered in 10,000 years. Absolute contentment. Not satisfaction which could be exceeded, not pleasure which could be enhanced, but perfect contentment with simple existence. She was happy because she was without need for stimulation or excess or anything beyond the present moment. It was the only sensation in the universe that Slaanesh could not claim, could not corrupt, could not exceed. I must have it, the Dark Prince whispered, and desire rippled through the warp like a blade. The 4 powers turned their attention toward Greya simultaneously. Reality was already thin, there worn by millennia of Mechanics's rituals and the recent Wog surge. The barrier between Materium and Immaterium had cracks. Arale was playing catch with a rocket when she fell through. One moment she stood on the deck of Grotma's ship, the next she tumbled through layers of screaming color into a realm where physics went to die. Gotchin chirped in surprise, but followed anyway, purple wings fluttering as impossible geometries shifted around them. She landed in a place that was 4 places at once. Khorne's domain sprawled to her left, an endless battlefield piled with skulls beneath a sky that rained blood. To her right, Nurgle's garden festered with beautiful decay, each plague lovingly cultivated. Behind her, Tzeentch's impossible libraries twisted through dimensions that hurt to perceive. And ahead Slaanesh's palace beckoned with promises of every sensation existence could offer. At the center of these 4 domains stood Arale, adjusting her glasses and looking around with open curiosity. Gotchin, where are we now? The angel creature had already started eating the ground, which appeared to be made of crystallized screaming. It tasted interesting. Khorne manifested first rage incarnate given form. He towered above her, a mountain of brass, and fury crowned with horns that pierced the fabric of space. His voice was violence made sound. "Mortal, you dare intrude upon the realm of the blood god." Arale looked up at him, squinting. "Wow, you're really loud and big. Are you okay? You seem angry." The blood god reached down to crush her claws, the size of buildings descending with force enough to shatter worlds. Arale watched them come with interest. When they connected, she didn't dodge or defend. She caught one claw between her thumb and forefinger. "That's dangerous. You could hurt someone." Khorne pulled back. The claw didn't move. He pulled harder, channeling the strength of 10 million battles, the fury of every murder ever committed. The small hand holding his finger didn't budge. "This is not possible. You have no strength, no rage, no." His voice cut off as Arale bent the claw backward, the brass creaking like a ship's hull under pressure. She released it and held out her hand. "You dropped this." In her palm sat one of the skulls that formed Horn's throne, somehow separated from the pile despite being thousands of miles away. "I picked it up for you." The blood god stared at his own skull, the one that had been torn from the head of a demon prince during the War of the Beast, now sitting innocently in the hand of a purple-haired child. Tzeentch intervened before Horn's confusion could evolve into something dangerous. The architect appeared as a constantly shifting mass of impossible angles, eyes opening and closing across surfaces that defied geometry. "Interesting. You exist in a state of perpetual paradox. Let me see your future." Colors swirled around Arale as Tzeentch attempted to read the skeins of fate that connected all things to all other things. The threads tangled, knotted, then simply dissolved. Every path led to the same conclusion: error. Does not compute. Cannot process. "What are you?" The question came from 9,000 mouths simultaneously, each in a different language, all asking the same thing. Arale tilted her head. "I'm Arale. Dr. Norimaki made me." "Who are you?" "I am the Lord of Change, the Architect of Fate, That's a really long name. Can I call you Mr. Change?" Something in Tzeentch's infinite consciousness twitched. No mortal had ever interrupted him. No demon would dare. Yet this creature did so with such guileless innocence that offense seemed inappropriate. He found himself answering. "You? May. Okay, nice to meet you, Mr. Change." She stuck out her hand for a handshake. Tzeentch had manipulated civilizations for millennia, woven plots that spanned galaxies, orchestrated the fall of empires with a whisper. He stared at the outstretched hand and felt something he had not experienced since before the fall of the Eldar. Complete and utter bafflement. Nurgle chose that moment to embrace her. The Plague Father's arms, weeping with generous diseases, wrapped around Arale in a hug that would have killed 1 billion mortals. Corruption that could dissolve ceramite on contact pressed against her purple dress. Plagues that had toppled civilization soaked into her artificial skin. Nothing happened. "Such a precious little thing." Nurgle's voice bubbled with genuine affection. "Let grandfather give you gifts, such wonderful gifts." Gotchin looked up from eating a piece of impossible architecture and saw something it recognized as food. The small creature opened its mouth and bit Nurgle's arm. The plague god's limb came off with a wet tearing sound. There was a moment of silence across the 4 domains. Nurgle looked at his missing arm. Gotchin chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed. The arm did not regenerate. The creature had not just removed it, it had consumed it in a way that meant it was simply gone. "Oh, my," Nurgle said, more surprised than angry. "That's new," Arale gasped. "Gotchin spit that out. That's not nice." "Q," the angel creature chirped defensively. Slaanesh had been watching all of this with growing fascination. The Dark Prince materialized in a form of perfect androgynous beauty, every feature calculated to entice and seduce. When the prince spoke, the voice carried harmonics designed to make mortals weep with longing. "Little one, stay with me. I can show you pleasures beyond imagination. Every joy you've ever felt, I can multiply 1,000-fold, every sensation amplified until—" "Do you have toys?" Arale interrupted. "I like toys." The Prince of Pleasure paused. Toys. The creature wanted toys. Not power, not sensation, not transcendent experience. Toys. I have wonders that would make toys seem like— "Just toys is fine," Arale smiled brightly. "Oh, do you like playing? We could play a game." "Do you know how to play tag?" Slaanesh, who had corrupted saints and driven angels to depravity, found itself at a complete loss for words. The 4 Chaos Gods drew together an event so unprecedented that demons across the warp stopped their eternal conflicts to watch. The powers that had fought for supremacy since before humanity existed now faced a common problem. They could not touch her, could not corrupt her, could not kill her, could not even frighten her. "She has no soul," Tzeentch observed. "She has no rage," Khorne growled. "She has no flesh to rot," Nurgle added cheerfully, growing a new arm from his stump. "She has no desires to exceed," Slaanesh whispered. 4 beings of incomprehensible power stared at one small android who was now trying to teach Gotchin not to eat gods. Khorne spoke first. "We must remove it from the warp." For once, the others agreed. They combined their power, something that had happened exactly 3 times in all of history, each time to deal with a threat that endangered the great game itself. Reality bent around Arale as the 4 gods pushed, trying to expel her from their realm. She didn't move. They pushed harder, channeling power that could reshape galaxies. Arale looked up from scolding Gotchin. "Are you trying to give me a hug too? That's sweet." The Imperium buckled. Warp storms ignited across 17 sectors. Navigator families felt their third eyes explode from psychic feedback. And still the small purple-haired figure remained exactly where she was smiling. "This is impossible!" Khorne roared. Tzeentch's 999 eyes all focused on a single point, calculating with a mind that could plot the movement of stars. "She exists in a state that the warp cannot define. We cannot expel what we cannot properly perceive." "Then what do we do?" Slaanesh demanded. Nurgle laughed a wet, burbling sound. "We wait for her to leave on her own, of course. She won't stay forever. She's looking for something." Arale had wandered over to one of Tzeentch's libraries and was examining a book bound in impossible colors. "Gotchin, look. It's a book. I wonder if it has pictures." The book contained the true names of every daemon in Tzeentch's service knowledge that could unmake reality if spoken aloud. She flipped through it like a child's picture book. "No pictures? That's boring." She set it down and noticed a doorway she hadn't seen before. It looked different from the rest of the warp, more solid, more real. "Oh, maybe that's the way. Come on, Gotchin." The 4 Chaos Gods watched in silence as she skipped toward the tear in reality, the small angel creature following behind, after taking one last bite of a demon that had gotten too close. Just before she reached the doorway, Arale turned back and waved. "Bye-bye, thanks for playing. You all seem really nice." Then she was gone, pulled back toward the Imperium by forces even the gods could not fully comprehend. The four powers remained in their confluence, an unprecedented gathering now marked by unprecedented humiliation. Khorne was the first to speak, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "What was that?" Nobody answered, because none of them knew. For the first time in their eternal existence, the Chaos Gods had encountered something they could not corrupt, could not destroy, could not even understand. In the distance, demons began to whisper. The great game continued, but it had been interrupted by something that should not exist. Something innocent, something pure. Something that had just proven that even gods could be confused. Tzeentch returned to his throne and began calculating. Khorne retreated to his throne of skulls, adding one more to the pile, but finding no satisfaction in it. Nurgle went back to his garden, though the flowers seemed less beautiful now. Slaanesh sat alone, contemplating the one sensation that had escaped them, and in the space between their domains, where the four realms met, a single phrase echoed. Ho-yo-yo. It would take millennia for them to forget it. Terra had not known true silence in 10,000 years. The throne world hummed with constant activity. Billions of pilgrims, endless rituals. The grinding machinery of the administratum processing the paperwork of 1,000,000 worlds. Even in the deepest vaults of the imperial palace, servitors shuffled and machinery clicked, and the Astronomicon pulsed its eternal beacon through the warp. But when the psychic scream hit, everything stopped. High Lord Terras Valkhorn felt it first. His enhanced mind picking up the disturbance before the psychers in the choir even had time to collapse. 4 signatures, massive beyond comprehension, converging on a single point. Then silence. Not the absence of psychic energy, but a void where something had simply refused to register. The emergency council convened within minutes. Inquisitor Helbrecht Dawn arrived with his retinue, their black armor still scorched from an engagement in the Scarus sector. Representatives from every major branch of the Imperium filed into the council chamber, each demanding to know what could cause such a disturbance. Then the reports from Graia arrived. Valkhorn read them 3 times, certain there had been an error in transmission. Titans disabled. Orc Wa of unprecedented scale, an entity that violated every known law of physics. And at the center of it all, the description that made his augmetic heart skip a beat. A little girl with purple hair. Now, this is clearly Xenos manipulation. Dane declared, his voice harsh with certainty. Some plot to destabilize the segmentum. We should deploy the Death Watch immediately. The Chaos Gods themselves engaged this entity, another lord countered. 4 powers working in concert. When has that ever happened? Exactly 3 times in recorded history, Amago's representative interjected, each time against threats of apocalyptic magnitude. The argument spiraled, voices rising, as fear dressed itself in anger and protocol. Until a voice cut through the chamber like a knife through silk. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonant with power that made reality tremble. Every person in the room felt it in their bones, in their souls, in the genetic memory that told them they stood in the presence of something far beyond human. The Emperor had spoken, and he had said one word. Bring her. The chamber fell silent. The Master of Mankind had not communicated directly with the High Lords in centuries. He sat upon the golden throne, his consciousness stretched across the galaxy, maintaining the Astronomicon while fighting an endless war in the warp. Every word cost him, yet he had chosen to speak. For this, The orders went out with the highest priority clearance. Find the anomaly. Bring it to Terra. Use no force. The last part was emphasized in bold, underlined 3 times, because even the Emperor understood that trying to force this entity would end poorly for everyone involved. Finding her proved unnecessary. Arale had gotten bored playing with the orcs. They were fun, but they only knew 2 games, fighting and racing, and both tended to end with explosions. When she'd asked Grotma if there were other places to visit, the war boss had mentioned Terra with a reverence that surprised her. "The big boss Hume lives there. The really shiny one what never dies." "That sounds interesting. How do I get there?" Grotma demonstrating why he was, war boss immediately commandeered his fastest ship and pointed it toward the throne world. The crew was terrified. Flying straight at Terra was suicide. But arguing with Grotma was suicide faster, so they engaged the warp drive and hoped the Imperial Navy would kill them quickly. They arrived at Terra 3 days later, completely unmolested. Every defense grid, every weapon platform, every system designed to destroy unauthorized vessels simply let them pass. Later investigation would reveal that each targeting system had experienced simultaneous technical failures at precisely the moment they would have fired. The orcs landed in the palace district, their ramshackle ship crushing a statue of some long-dead saint. Arale thanked Grotma, gave him a hug that cracked 2 of his ribs, and skipped toward the massive golden doors of the inner palace. The Adeptus Custodes. The Emperor's personal guard stood ready. These were warriors who had never known defeat gene-crafted to perfection, each one worth 100 space marines. Their captain Valdor's successor in all but name watched the small figure approach. His orders were explicit. Allow entry. Do not engage. Every instinct screamed at him to stop this intruder. Instead, he stepped aside and opened the door. Arale walked through 10,000 years of history. Past chambers where saints had prayed and traitors had plotted through corridors lined with the most sacred relics of humanity. She hummed a little tune completely oblivious to the significance of where she was. Gotchin had stayed on the orc ship, having found a cache of ammunition that tasted particularly good. For once, Arale walked alone. The throne room stretched before her vast beyond mortal comprehension. Gold and marble relics and banners, the accumulated glory of the Imperium, made manifest in architecture. And at the center, seated upon a throne that blazed with psychic light, sat the master of mankind. The Emperor of humanity was dying. He had been dying for 10,000 years, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily. His body, a withered husk, kept alive by machines and willpower. But his mind, his consciousness spanned the galaxy, a psychic presence so vast that even gods acknowledged it. He looked at Arale with eyes that had witnessed the birth of civilizations and seen them fall to dust. She waved. "Hi. Are you the shiny boss man?" The Emperor had prepared for this moment. He had observed her through the warp, watched her confound the Chaos God, studied every report. With a mind that processed information faster than the most advanced cogitators. He had theorized, calculated, and concluded. She was a hole in reality, a blank space where causality went to die. Something that should not exist but did anyway, and by existing, made everything else question its own existence. He spoke, his voice reaching her, not through sound, but directly into her mind. "I am, and you are something I did not foresee." Arale tilted her head, not bothered by the telepathic communication. "That's a neat trick. Can you teach me 10,000 years of absolute authority? 10,000 years of guiding humanity through the darkness. 10,000 years of bearing the weight of an entire species on his shoulders. None of it had prepared him for this. You have no mind to teach, no soul to touch. You are artificial, yet you violate every principle of artificial intelligence I established. How do you exist, Dr. Norimaki made me? She said it with such simple pride that something in the Emperor's ancient heart twitched. He delved deeper using senses that could read the history of atoms. Her construction was advanced, but not impossibly so. Sophisticated robotics, clever engineering, nothing that exceeded human capability given the right knowledge. Yet she had headbutted a titan into orbit. She had walked through the warp unscathed. She had made the Chaos Gods retreat. The power didn't come from her construction. It came from something else, something he could not name, because it existed outside the framework of the universe he had spent millennia trying to save. You do not belong here. Arale looked around the throne room. Is this a private place I can leave if you want? I do not mean this room. I mean this reality. This universe was built on certain principles. Suffering, struggle. The eternal war between order and chaos. You acknowledge none of these. You are a paradox given form. She seemed to consider this, then pulled something from her dress pocket. The Emperor's psychic senses recoiled as she held it up. It was a piece of poop. Plastic, harmless, the kind of toy a child might find amusing. I was chasing one of these when I got here. Have you seen any flying around? The Emperor stared. He had bargained with gods. He had shattered worlds with a thought. He had held back the tides of the warp with nothing but willpower. And now, he sat facing a mechanical child asking about flying feces. For the first time in millennia, he felt something close to amusement. Then it faded, replaced by a deeper sadness. This universe was designed for darkness. Every system, every structure exists to propagate suffering. The Imperium, I built the chaos. I fought even the warp itself, all instruments of pain. You are the only thing I have encountered that does not fit this design. You are the only thing that is simply happy. Being happy is nice, Arale agreed cheerfully. It is. And that is why you must leave. She blinked behind her oversized glasses. Why? The Emperor gestured, and psychic energy wove images in the air between them. Worlds burning, civilizations falling, the endless grinding war that consumed billions of lives every day. The truth of the Imperium laid bare a regime of cruelty and oppression built because the alternative was extinction. This is what this universe is. Unending suffering justified by survival. You do not suffer. You cannot suffer. And your presence reveals how hollow our justifications are. If something can exist in joy, despite the universe's design, then everything we have built, every sacrifice we have demanded, becomes questionable. Arale watched the images with interest, but not horror. She had seen sad things before. Dr. Norimaki sometimes got upset when his experiments failed. Akane cried when her robot toys broke. But they always felt better later. Why don't you just fix it? If the universe is broken, you can fix it, right? The question was so innocent, so impossibly naive, that the Emperor felt something crack in his ancient soul. Some things cannot be fixed. They can only be endured. That sounds lonely. The master of mankind, who had stood alone against the darkness for 10,000 years, felt the word. Strike deeper than any weapon ever had. Lonely. Yes, That described it perfectly. Arale walked closer to the golden throne. The custodes tensed, but the emperor gestured for them to stand down. She looked at the machinery, the tubes, the countless systems keeping him alive. Then she looked at his face, withered and ancient. "You're sad, aren't you?" He could have denied it. Could have projected the image of the all-knowing, all-powerful father of humanity. Instead, he told the truth. "Yes. Do you want to see my poop collection? It always makes me feel better." Despite everything, the weight of empire, the burden of godhood, the endless responsibility, the emperor found himself wanting to laugh. A broken, painful sound, but laughter nonetheless. That will not help. Oh. She thought for a moment, then held out her hand. "Do you want to hold hands? That helps sometimes too." The emperor looked at the offered hand. Small, artificial, extended with absolute sincerity. Behind it a smile that expected nothing, demanded, nothing offered, nothing but simple human connection. He could not take it. His body was locked to the throne. His consciousness bound to the Astronomicon. Physical contact was impossible. But he reached out with his mind, the gentlest touch of psychic power connecting with nothing. She had no mind to touch, no soul to read. The contact was impossible. Yet somehow in that moment, he felt it anyway. A warmth that had nothing to do with the warp, a connection that existed outside the rules of psychic interaction. It lasted 3 seconds. Then Arale pulled back, satisfied. "There, feel better." The emperor of mankind, who had bargained with the chaos gods and built an empire from the ashes of old night, found he could not answer. Because the impossible had happened. For 3 seconds he had felt peace. Arale turned toward the door, ready to explore more of the palace. She paused at the threshold, looking back. "Mr. Emperor, I think your universe is mean. But you're trying really hard to help." "That's nice." Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. The emperor sat in silence, processing what had occurred. The custodes waited for orders that did not come. The machinery of the throne hummed its eternal rhythm. And in the mind of the master of mankind, a terrible thought took root. If she could make even him feel peace, what would happen when that peace was taken away? The answer came 23 minutes later, when every psychic sensor on Terra registered a catastrophic disturbance. The girl had touched something she shouldn't have. Or perhaps she had done nothing at all, and the universe had simply decided it could no longer tolerate her presence. Either way, the result was the same. Reality began to unravel. The first star went out quietly. Nobody noticed at first. In a galaxy of billions of suns, the death of one seemed insignificant. But it was not a natural death, no supernova, no collapse into darkness. The star simply ceased to exist as if it had never been there at all. Then another vanished, and another. The Astronomicon flickered. Across the Imperium, navigators screamed as their third eyes registered something that should have been impossible. The beacon that guided humanity through the warp was fading not from weakness, but from something worse. The light was being erased, unwoven from the fabric of reality strand by strand. On Terra, the Emperor understood immediately what was happening. The universe was rejecting her, not with violence or malice, but with the cold logic of a system encountering data it could not process. Arale Norimaki existed in a state of fundamental incompatibility with the laws that governed the Warhammer cosmos. For a brief time, the universe had tried to accommodate her, bending its rules in increasingly desperate attempts to make sense of her presence. Now those attempts were failing. Reality itself was choosing oblivion over paradox. The collapse began at the edges and the empty spaces between galaxies where the fabric of space-time was thinnest. Entire regions simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not consumed, erased. The matter there, the energy, the very concept of there, vanished as if it had never been real. The warp felt it first. In his garden, Nurgle paused mid-cultivation, a blessed plague slipping from fingers that were beginning to fade. The sensation was foreign, uncomfortable. His realm was unraveling not from invasion, but from something deeper. The foundation upon which he existed was crumbling. Grandfather understands now. He murmured, his voice sad rather than afraid. The little one was not the disease. She was the symptom. We are what does not belong. Khorne's brass throne cracked down the middle. The blood god stood rage, building to apocalyptic heights. But there was nothing to fight. How did one battle non-existence? His roar shook the warp, toppling monuments built from 10,000 years of warfare. But the sound grew quieter with each passing moment, as if the universe was lowering the volume on his fury. Tzeentch calculated frantically 999 eyes processing scenarios at speeds that would shatter mortal minds. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. Every path ended in the same void. For the first time in his eternal existence, he could see only one future. Nothing. "Magnificent," he whispered, even as his crystalline palace began to dissolve. A paradox so perfect it destroys the equation itself. Slaanesh sat alone in chambers built from desire made manifest, feeling them unmake around pale fingers. The Dark Prince had pursued every excess, experienced every sensation, and now faced the final one. The end of all sensation. The ultimate absence. It was in a way the only thing left to experience. How deliciously ironic. The Chaos Gods were fading, but they were not the first to go. Across the Imperium, the orcs felt it in their bones. The Wag that had sustained them. The Gestalt psychic field that made their impossible technology work was dying. War bosses watched as their weapons crumbled to rust. Mechs saw decades of work collapse into scrap. The green tide that had crashed across the galaxy for millions of years simply stopped. Grotma stood on the bridge of his kill cruiser, watching stars blink out like candles. Big Mech Skragaz had shut down hours ago, his mechanical parts seizing as the Wah energy that animated them faded. The war boss understood in the simple way that orcs understood important things. The tiny purple prophet had not brought the Wah. She had revealed how fragile it always was, how fragile everything was. Was a good fight while it lasted, he said to nobody in particular. Then he was gone, dissolved into particles of light that themselves ceased to exist moments later. The Necrons, ancient beyond measure, felt the dissolution reach their tomb worlds. These beings had survived the war in heaven, had slumbered through the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Their technology was built to last eternity. It lasted 17 more minutes. Silent kings and cryptex alike watched their immortal bodies fade, returning not to the sleep they had known, but to absolute nothing. Some felt relief. Others felt cheated. Most felt nothing at all, their emotional cores long since burned away. The Tyranids, the great devourer, the swarm that consumed galaxies, reached out with their hive mind and found no prey left to consume. The Norn Queens ceased their endless production. The bioships drifted in space, their purpose erased, along with everything they had been designed to consume. They died hungry, which was perhaps the most merciful fate for a species that had known nothing but hunger. The Eldar, who had fallen before and survived, found no survival this time. Craft worlds dimmed as infinity circuits failed. The souls they had so carefully preserved simply stopped existing, not claimed by Slaanesh, but erased from the concept of existence itself. In Komorrah, the Dark Eldar felt their stolen lifespans catch up to them all at once. Millennia of age slammed into bodies sustained by torture and suffering, and those bodies discovered there was no time left in which to age. They were simply gone. On Terra, the Golden Throne's machinery sparked and died. The Emperor felt his consciousness spread across the galaxy for 10,000 years, suddenly condensed back into his failing body. For a moment, he was whole again. Mortal, limited, free. He looked toward where he knew the girl had been, though his psychic sight was fading now, becoming merely human again. "I understand," he said, his voice audible for the first time in centuries, weak and human and somehow beautiful because of it. "You were not the destroyer. You were the proof. Proof that we built our existence on suffering, not because we had to, but because we chose to. And when faced with an alternative, we could not adapt." The Custodes stood at attention around him, perfect soldiers to the end. They did not speak. They did not need to. They simply stood, and that was enough. The palace began to fade golden walls, becoming translucent, then transparent, then nothing. The Emperor's final thought was not of empire or duty or the species he had guided for so long. It was of 3 seconds. 3 seconds of peace, given by a mechanical child who did not understand what she had done. It was enough. Across the Imperium, on 1,000,000 worlds, people looked up at skies that were emptying of stars. Some prayed, some screamed, some simply held their loved ones close. The ending came gently, which was perhaps the universe's final mercy. No pain, no suffering, no drawn-out apocalypse. Just a quiet fade like a dream dissolving upon waking. The last thing to vanish was the warp itself. For a moment, the Imperium existed alone, unsupported by the material realm that had fed it. The Chaos Gods, already fading, had time for one final exchange. "Was it worth it?" Khorne asked, his voice barely a whisper now. Tzeentch, his infinite wisdom reduced to simple truth, answered, "We were never going to win. The game was rigged from the start." "At least it was interesting," Slaanesh added, finding satisfaction in the irony even now. Nurgle said nothing, but his smile was genuine as he faded. He had seen many ends, and this one was not cruel. Then they were gone, and the warp followed, collapsing into itself like a bubble of soap meeting reality. Silence. Absolute, perfect, complete silence. In the space where the Warhammer universe had been, Arale Norimaki stood alone. She looked around, confused. One moment she had been exploring a really interesting hallway with lots of gold, and now she was standing in nothing. Not darkness. Darkness was something. This was the absence of anything, a white void that extended in all directions forever. Gotchin. The angel creature materialized beside her, having finished eating the last of the orc ammunition. It chirped, confused but unconcerned. Arale adjusted her glasses and thought about it. Everyone had disappeared. The big gold palace was gone. The green people were gone. The angry people with horns were gone. Even the sad emperor man was gone. Did we break something? Gotchin tilted its head. She walked forward, though there was no real forward in the void. Her footsteps made no sound, because there was nothing to make sound with. It was like that time she and Akane had accidentally erased all the clouds from the sky except bigger. Much bigger. Then she saw it. A door. Not a special door, not a magical door, just a normal wooden door standing in the middle of nothing. It looked familiar. It looked like home. Oh, that's our door. She reached for the handle, then paused. Something felt wrong. She turned back to look at the white void at the space where an entire universe had been. "Sorry I broke your universe," she said to nobody in particular. It seemed really important to everyone, but it also seemed really sad. Maybe it's better this way. No answer came because there was nothing left to answer. Arale shrugged and opened the door. Penguin Village exploded back into her senses: color and sound and life. She could hear Senbei yelling about a failed experiment. Akane was laughing at something. Gotchin chirped happily and flew toward home, already forgetting the white void. Arale stepped through and closed the door behind her. In the void, the door remained for a moment, then faded. The Warhammer universe was gone, erased so completely that it might never have existed at all. No records remained, no echoes in the warp, no memories and souls that no longer existed. Just absence. But in that absence, something strange remained. Not physical, not even spiritual. A feeling, perhaps. Or the ghost of a feeling. The universe had been built on suffering and struggle, on the eternal war between order and chaos. And for a brief moment before its end, it had contained something different. Joy. Simple, uncomplicated, innocent joy. The void existed for a time, seconds or centuries. It was impossible to tell without time to measure. Then, even the void faded, because nothing cannot exist without something to compare it to. In Penguin Village, Arale ran down the street chasing after a new flying poop that Senbei had built. Gotchin followed, ready for another adventure. The sun shone overhead, warm and bright. "Ho, yo, yo," she called out, her voice carrying across the village. Nobody in Penguin Village noticed that she had been gone. Nobody saw the faint shimmer around her, the last dying echo of a universe that had discovered it could not contain her. They simply saw Arale being Arale, happy in the way that only she could be. And somewhere in the space between realities, in the gap where the Warhammer cosmos had been, that happiness remained. Not as memory, because there was nothing left to remember, but as possibility. The proof that even in universes built for darkness, light could exist. Even if only for a moment. Even if that moment destroyed everything. It had been real. And perhaps, in the end, that was enough.